Good day to you all. This is Terence Baker, News Editor, Europe, Middle East and Africa at CoStar News Hotels, part of CoStar and STR. Welcome to our monthly podcast where we analyze and look into all the scenes and movements and news in the EMEA region. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. I very much appreciate it. Also, huge thanks to our guest this week. We have a fantastic speaker. I'm really looking forward to this podcast. Manesh Balani is Managing Director of Dubai-based procurement firm Orsini SPI. They look at procurement of construction and development things such as furniture, fixtures and equipment, all that wonderful stuff. It may not be the most salivating section of the hotel industry, but completely vital. And obviously, based in Dubai, Manesh has seen some challenges perhaps in the last 2 or 3 months. Thank you, Manesh. Welcome. How are you?
Good, Terence. Thank you very much for having me today. Looking forward to this conversation as well.
Pleasure. Our absolute pleasure. So maybe, Manesh, you can start by telling us a little bit about your history in the hotel industry and the history of Orsini.
Yeah. So my history with hospitality actually started when I studied hotel management in Switzerland. So I did a 2.5-year program. At that time, it was Glion, the school, Centre International de Glion. Today it's just known as Glion. And I had done my degree in hospitality management. And shortly thereafter, I was offered a job with Four Seasons in Washington, D.C., where I stayed with them for about 2 years before returning back to Hong Kong, where I was born and brought up. But while I was studying hotel management, I had an opportunity to do an internship here in Dubai. So that gave me my first exposure back to 1995 when Sheikh Zayed Road was this kind of dusty 2-lane highway going from Dubai to Abu Dhabi. And I ended up back over here in the late 2000s. So I've been here for 25 years now.
And so you've seen some huge changes in that time.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you see it from a nice little village turning into this international and very important regional hub that Dubai has become, or the UAE has become, for a lot of the growth that's happening within Middle East and Africa as well.
Well, so that's a fascinating history. I was preparing for this podcast. I was looking at Dubai and changes, and I found a fascinating website called DubaiAsItUsedToBe.net. Have a look at that. There's some fantastic old photographs of what Dubai used to be like, and we know. I mean, we're talking just a little bit more than half a century. So within a lot of our lifetimes. And it's a fascinating metamorphosis. I think that's the correct word. So Manesh, let's talk a little bit about Orsini. How did that develop, and how did you get your how did that company increase its clients and holding in the area?
It's an old adage of being in the right place at the right time. And having come out to Dubai in early 2000, it was a time that they were just launching the Palm Island, and they had flooded the marina just a couple of weeks before I'd come here. So there was a huge already foresight from the government in terms of developing the tourism infrastructure and looking at how do they create unique spaces over here. And that's what Dubai has always been famous for, with the Burj Al Arab, the Burj Khalifa, the Palm Islands that we have. And it was just one opportunity after the other that allowed me to enter into procurement services, where there was a hotel being built on the Sheikh Zayed Road, the Shangri-La Hotel, and a company was actually managing the procurement for it. It was a UK-based company who had come out here, and they were struggling with actually on-the-ground services. So I ended up working together with them to help the implementation of the OS&E, which I always say is a touchy-feely stuff that actually guests interact with. And being able to work together with the hotel operators, my understanding of hotel background really was beneficial, because then we were speaking the same language with the ownership, and also then understanding from the developers, what was their budgets, what were the constraints, what were they looking at, and how do we find that balance between hotel operator needs and as well what is required from the ownership, and how do we get everything here in a short period of time. And as you were saying earlier, back to old days. I mean, this is time of still using faxes to communicate with people. Email
Yes,
was
indeed.
just nascent back then. So it was
Yes.
really about understanding how to source, where to get the right products from, how to get everything to come in on time for this hotel opening. And fortunately, from there, we were able to grow as the UAE grew, and Dubai has become this regional hub for hospitality, where you've got so much experience and expertise from all disciplines that are based over here, that we were able to support a lot of the hotel groups as they were expanding across the rest of GCC, plus as well as they expanded into Africa. We've been able to support them. So we now service the entire Middle East, we service Africa, and we service as well Southeast Asia from here.
I mean, it's a critical part of the world. It's become that way, halfway between the big cities of Europe and Singapore and the big cities of Southeast Asia. Obviously, the demand for tourism has grown exponentially in the area. People go there on vacation, UAE especially, but also Oman and other areas in that region. And then, of course, we had a conflict started 2 or 3 months ago, the end of February. Was it March? Can't remember.
Yeah.
Things
End
happen
of
so
February.
quickly. End of February. You are in a point, of course, of critical importance in terms of energy flow around the world. You're also, as you said, critical area of hub airports, not only Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, increasingly so. And you have a great deal of tourism, an increasing number of tourists coming. So, since the conflict started, might be obvious, but tell us something about the constraints that you saw as a company, your client saw, in order to get hotels refurbished, developed, or new builds, etc. Did it come to a screeching halt? What was some of the things you saw going on?
Yeah. So, a lot of this we had the benefit, if I can say it today, of COVID, where we were very, very quick to adapt in the way that we work and that we operate. We saw many companies move back into work from home policies right away, as everybody was trying to understand the exact scale of what was happening, and to make sure that there was personal safety. So that was everyone's first concern, that there was personal safety. And then came the next part of saying, okay, now what do we do and how do we continue to operate? Being a company based in Dubai, majority of our work is actually outside of the area. So we've been actually, working together with our clients seamlessly, making sure that their projects were not going to be interrupted. Saudi Arabia, fortunately, their shipping ports have remained open. Likewise, across Africa, there's no disruption to shipping for them. But that was a huge impact here for the UAE, because the main port, which is Dubai, you have to enter through the Strait of Hormuz to get here. So nothing was coming in, nothing could go out from here as well. So these were, kind of challenges that we immediately had to resolve. From ourselves, we had a project that we were working on. We, in fact, had a container, which was our last container for the project. Oddly enough, it had all the tabletops, while the bases had already been delivered previously. And the container couldn't come in to the Strait of Hormuz, got diverted to Karachi in Pakistan. And we were finally able to get our goods 2 months later,
My goodness.
after they had to get the shipments diverted from Karachi, get additional freight corridors opened where we could get the goods coming in through the port of Fujairah on the east side of the UAE.
So
So,
essentially, they had
yeah,
the legs of the tables up, all ready to be served food, but no tabletop. I mean, it's
no
I don't know
tabletop.
how you get around that. I mean,
Yeah.
what were your clients saying to you? I mean, there are some similarities with COVID. Obviously, um, a reduction in occupancy, notably, but differences in the sense that you were allowed to free access and movement of people, not particularly your containers, but there were some differences and similarities. But what were your clients coming to you and saying, this is our challenge, this is our second challenge, this is our third challenge? How can you, as a knowledgeable client to them, help us? So, what were they saying? What were they worrying about? Was it just lack of occupancy, or was there something else?
Well, I think different markets, different issues that were there. So UAE,
Dubai
of
first.
course, yeah, UAE and Dubai in general is the fact that hotels were running with very low occupancy. People fled, people left. There was a lot of residents who were renting long term in hotel rooms. They've all gone. So we knew that several hotels, or we know that several hotels had to close, unfortunately. We know that some of the groups, they've had to consolidate their guests into, certain properties in order just to create efficiencies within certain assets that you have there. But what we've what we've heard is that many of the hotels that closed are also planning to go through some refurbishments as well, with occupancies being as high as they were prior to the conflict that happened. There was a lot of wear and tear. And those that actually have the plans already in hand are taking a look and saying, well, this is a good opportunity for us now to instigate these refurbishments while we can. Because we know that once the situation recovers, that occupancy will start to climb back up. But it's, of course, going to take a bit of a gradual step in order to get back to that high occupancy levels that Dubai had
Of
prior to the
course.
conflict. It's a good opportunity, right? The
Absolutely.
smart investors should go for it.
Absolutely, and at Hotel News Now, CoStar News Hotels, we've written on this refurbishment capex planning for some of the larger hotels who seem to be the ones who have deep pockets and see this as an opportunity. One of the comments somebody told me was, this is not just a question of refurbishment, it's a question of how do you reposition your hotels for the next wave of tourists coming in, and they will come back. I mean, when these hotels, it's some of the big ones, Burj Al Arab and the St. Regis, Atlantis, I think, was a part of the refurbishment. What are they saying to you? I mean, what are you saying to them in terms of, okay, you've got these great plans, now is the ideal opportunity, the ideal time to do this refurbishment, but you're going to have a little bit of, there's going to be a few problems in moving and sourcing goods and getting them to you. I mean, what advice have you and guidance have you been giving them?
Well, the main advice that we give to our clients today, whether it's here in the UAE or even the ones that are outside, it's let's make sure that we buy early enough, that we bring the goods in and that you have them next to you. If it means that you need to pay a little bit extra for warehousing, let's factor that into our budgets. But we don't know what's going to happen with logistics, and that's continuously the problem that we need to monitor. Costs are very high at the moment. I think in some cases they've tripled in order for shipments to be moved from Far East up to the Middle East. And that is continuously, a concern because it escalates your budgets and your amount of spend without any direct benefit to the end product that you're bringing in. And that's where we're always trying to help our clients balance these budgets and say, okay, where do we make sure that we're putting the right money to get the right value for the product that's going to be felt, that's going to be touched by a customer inside of the property. FF&E and OS&E is essentially everything that's touchy-feely that a guest is going to touch and use, much more than the quality of plaster that you put on a ceiling or the wallpaper on the wall.
Yes.
And what we say to them is, look, with this uncertainty that's out there, rather than the just-in-time strategy that we used to work with, let's make sure that we're going with the strategy that's going to make sure that the goods are here, that they're next to you, and that you're going to be able to have them delivered and installed into your project rather than risking of trying to save a little bit on storage cost. That you should actually make sure that the goods are right next to you.
Was there some first move advantage in the hotels that announced these refurbishment packages quickly in order, or logistics change every day in that part of the world at the moment.
Yeah, logistics is changing every day. What we saw at the very beginning was that there was no access for material to come into the UAE besides land transportation and air transportation as soon as that started coming back online. The government was very quick then to introduce a green corridor between the UAE and Oman. So they came to an agreement where ships could dock in Oman, offload the goods, have it transported across the UAE, cleared over here, and vice versa as well, right? UAE is a big exporter of material. So that additional corridor for exporting was important. And we had the port of Fujairah in the UAE plus Corfacan that opened up that allowed for vessels to come in and allow for material to come through. There's also an additional corridor that opened up with Saudi. So as it continues to evolve, everyone's finding a new way to actually work on the logistics. For example, now we have a project that we're doing in Greece. We've got material over here that needs to be sent across, and we're looking at exploring the option of sending it by road because it's probably the most assured routing that we're going to get versus by sea freight, where there's a risk that a vessel may not come or it may not have the space to collect your material. And then you're actually delayed further on. So it's really just allowing sufficient time for these eventualities to come up.
So there's evidently some bonding and friendship between some of the nations in the region because of this. Hardship often brings out the best in people. Give us a sense, Manesh, about what the shipping is like at the moment and the general situation in Dubai. I mean, this changes all the time. We tend to get the bad headlines here, but I think fairly soon the UAE suggested that things are fine. There's no need to worry. But give me a sense of what's been happening in the last few days, perhaps.
Yeah. Look, on the ground over here, we haven't really felt any shortage of materials. So we've been very fortunate that whatever we need from a day-to-day perspective, it's all available here. Whether it's produced locally or produced in the region, we have enough supplies. Where we're probably going to start seeing some challenges is with raw materials that are required for construction. And we're already seeing that prices are escalating because there are companies who have either had material in stock and they're taking advantage of the current scenario to be able to say, well, let's increase my yield on what I have available with me. Or it's because of imports that they are now bringing through. Maybe they were already on the water and they're finally being able to get them cleared, that they have these additional charges that are coming through. So it's really all about increase in costs that we're seeing right now. I
And across
believe,
the
yeah,
summer, as we carry on, I mean, do you see fundamental changes, or just pricing is going to be all over the place?
yeah. So this is all dependent on what happens with the Strait of Hormuz. The big question at the moment: is it open? Is it not open? Who's keeping it closed at the moment? We've got to have that answer and that resolve,
We
which
don't
will
seem to
then
get that
allow.
answer on a weekly basis, do we? It changes.
No, it changes every day, right? I mean, we go to sleep at one night expecting something, and the next day it's a complete different scenario that we wake up to. Uh, so what's going to happen over the summer is really just dependent on how we get through with this Strait of Hormuz. That's going to determine what happens with freight and what happens with shipping. We are starting to see more people in Dubai itself. So I think that's also going to have a little bit of an impact because there will be more consumption that comes through versus when the conflict started, there was probably enough stock and inventory of all materials over here. And then just with the reduction of the number of people that were in the country, that just created a little bit of excess of inventory. So that we're going to start, I feel we're going to start seeing that reducing right now until people start to invest and replenish onto their stock holdings that they have.
And I'm not sure how much procurement and supply business you do in Saudi Arabia. Obviously, with giga projects, probably more than any affected by the price of oil, um, funds for development and the construction. What are you seeing there in terms of your direct experience and in general?
So with our projects that we're involved with in Saudi Arabia, there is no shift in deadlines. Uh, Time frames for completion are still aggressive. There is the vision for mega events that are going to come up with the Expo and with the Football World Cup as well. So the tourism authorities, and whether it's government related projects or it is private investors, everyone is looking to continue on the path that they started. We haven't seen any changes in terms of the projects that we're working on in any of the giga projects at this stage.
And
And
our general view was that if anything was pulled back a little bit, it was just because of the amazing, fantastic vision. It was almost too much of a vision. And some of it was just not probably doable right from the beginning. The line, extending hundreds of miles, etc. And these things are, dream big, perhaps, but reality will set in a little. But of course, the Giga projects still remain a pretty amazing body of work across the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. How about North Africa? Obviously, that probably uses Dubai and Abu Dhabi as hub airports more and more now. It's probably pulling Africa as a continent, for some things pull more towards the Middle East. How do you see what you're doing there changing? And also perhaps occupancy levels and guest routes, etc., airport hub routes.
yeah, so I think one of the benefits for Africa in general is that Turkey with Turkish Airlines has also been a great feeder into the African continent. So where you would have had people transiting through Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Qatar previously, maybe some of that has actually shifted through to Turkey. But we are seeing, and I was actually coming back into Dubai about 2 weeks ago, and there was a lot of transit passengers coming in through the airport as well. So we are starting to see that cross movement of people coming back again. So I don't think that, the impact in terms of the airline and movement of people into Africa has really had that kind of a significant change than what it was prior to COVID. And we're seeing that Emirates Airline has announced that they're back up to almost full capacity in number of flights that they're traveling through. So I think that's all a positive sign. With regards to the impact into Africa, Africa is so vast, it's so large. What happens on the west is completely different than what happens on the east side, and likewise north and south are just so different in terms of the servicing that they get and the travelers that they come through. So what we're seeing is the projects that we're working on as well. Clients are still very keen on completing those projects. They are very conscious, of course, about the increase in terms of freight costs. But I think their issues have been always a lot more related to currency rather than in terms of is there demand and how are people going to come to us.
Yeah, Ethiopian Airlines is another major carrier
Yeah.
in the continent. We saw last week that Accor has signed a multi development agreement in Nigeria to double their portfolio there. So things are happening. Is there, Manesh, a correlation between increases in occupancy, talking about Saudi Arabia coming back to near normal, and supply routes and procurement? If a number of occupancy comes back, do projects immediately ramp up a little bit in order to build new hotels or refurbish hotels, or are you still very much dependent on the security in the region? So there's going to be a bit of lag between the guests coming back and maybe new products, new hotels catering to them.
Well, my view is that, as occupancy levels go back up, that means confidence is there. People are coming back in. So as soon as the developers and the smart ones, that they see the occupancy levels are starting to ramp up again, that's a great time to reinitiate your project. Or if you've got something that was in the pipeline, make sure that you start moving on that project, because then it allows you to ride and get in and complete your project as you're getting towards the top of the occupancy levels as well. So increase in occupancy is always going to be a show of increase in confidence.
And you're aware, are you, of seeing more holiday makers or more business coming back into Dubai?
There are people that are ready to come back in, that they've been wanting to come back and make their client visits, because in-person meetings just hold so much more value in this part of the world, and everyone wants to be coming back either into Dubai. We see Saudi is still very busy. One of the constraints that we actually have is just the number of flights, because in the UAE presently, the number of flights are restricted. I think we primarily have Emirates and Fly Dubai that have multiple flights per day, versus other airlines that have a restriction. And I think this is until the end of May, from what I understand. But once we start getting more flights, more airlines actually flying here, we're going to see occupancy levels go up. People are going to want to do their stopover while they're cross transiting from Europe to Asia or vice versa. And just have a little bit of a 2-day break before they carry on.
And how about some of the other powerhouses in the region, perhaps not quite at the level of Dubai or Saudi, but Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait? What are you seeing there?
Yeah. Um, Qatar has always been a question after the World Cup, and they've had their own struggles in terms of how do they bring back the occupancy levels as well. And I think they will have to play that game in terms of figuring out their position of trying to get people to come back in. Bahrain, for me, we see that there's still a lot of continued requirements for hospitality assets there. Let's remember they have the causeway between Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, which is a big feeder of clients that are coming through. So they benefit from that type of tourism that's coming in from Saudi Arabia, from neighboring countries. And, Oman has actually relatively been open since the beginning. And I understand that Oman actually relies a lot on local tourism, which still continues to be there. So that is a market that airline flights industries are still going through, and people are going for staycations or little weekend breaks from the UAE to Oman just to have a little bit of a different experience as well.
Yes. I mean, Oman is also targeted the luxury level. Those guests perhaps have pivoted more quickly than others,
Hmm.
chosen southern Spain or other luxury destinations. They'll presumably a bit slower to come back, but of course, a lot of the hotel industry is utterly dependent now on the upper upscale and luxury pipeline and the rates that come with it.
Yeah. And this is, what we're seeing quite extensively across projects that we're working on in Saudi Arabia. What we're seeing here in the UAE, a lot of the developments are on that ultra luxury type of hotels. Um, and that's a challenge for us in terms of managing procurement and logistics, because while we might tell an owner, let's use the opportunity to consolidate more products from a particular vendor in order to be able to maximize, the cost of freight that's coming through. When you talk about luxury and ultra luxury, every property is trying to curate a story, and items are very bespoke. So we're looking at multiple different vendors that we're trying to select product from, and figuring out how do we make sure that that product is still affordable when it comes in, despite current escalation in costs that we have for freight.
But such is the competition between luxury hotels, then quality is all, isn't it? Where it comes from, you might always still want Italian leather, or you might, etc. So, it's probably not the chance or the opportunity really to say, well, let's shift temporarily to a new vendor. No, you can't do that. You have to have that, and that, as you say, brings challenges. It leads me perhaps on to one of my last questions, Manesh, on sustainability and local source goods and products. I mean, that's obviously been a big thing in the hotel industry in the last 10, 15 years. Is that changing in your region, and how has the conflict affected that?
Yeah. Sustainability and local sourcing is always a key focus, I think, for hospitality developers right now. Hotel groups are very tuned in to the requirements of being able to work with local manufacturers, looking at local initiatives to be able to bring in a sense of place into the hotel environment. And we strongly support that because part of the reason for tourism to exist is also to bring employment to local populations. So we see that there is an increase in terms of companies here who are manufacturing locally. It's not to the scale of what we would have maybe in Europe or what you might have, of course, in China, but we are starting to see more and more companies here producing furniture, producing lighting, producing carpets. We see some OS&E being produced here as well. So China, where we've got from mass production, we've got up, even down to small handicrafts companies that are producing small batch items to create the unique tabletop experiences that people are looking for. So that still continues to be a big focus in saying, how can we minimize the risk of supply chain because items have to come from overseas? Can we work more with local producers? And do we have the opportunity as well then to help the hotels create that story that they want to be able to share with their guest experience?
One of the fascinating things I've seen when I've driven around the UAE, and I've been to Liwa, the Oasis, I've been to Fujairah, I've been to Al Ain, is a number of these factories that you see dotted around. They all have the same frontage. It's like usually metal, isn't it? It all looks the
Yeah.
same. But if you drive around, it's kind of interesting. In between the big sand dunes and the other things to see in the UAE, a lot of manufacturing. You even see that in the middle of nowhere, you see people making fishing nets. And you're like, it's like you're 30 miles away from the coast there. So,
Yeah.
Manesh, as we wrap up, give me an indication of your positivity for future for Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and the region. You sound positive.
Extremely. Look, I've been here for 25 years. We've seen multiple challenges that the country has had to go through. But despite all of those challenges that have come through, the headwinds that were thrown across to the UAE, every time they've come across a little bit stronger than they were previously. And I believe that what the UAE had done or has done for the tourism industry has actually also spurred places like Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia to also change their perception of tourism coming through, that it's no longer just for business, that it's also leisure tourism. There's culture to be shared across with visitors that come in. So, the UAE continues to pioneer with hospitality, with tourism. It becomes one of the easy destinations that people like to come into, and it's a destination that I think once this conflict is cleared, that very quickly we're going to start seeing that tourism come back through events, through different shows that are going to happen, and that will spur on then as well then with the leisure tourists that will come right behind it.
We are blessed in this industry. We say it time and time again that vacations and people need to travel, business needs to travel, needs to meet people. So we are very blessed. I wish you all the very best, Manesh, and also the region. Thank you again, Manesh Balani, Managing Director of Orsini, procurement company specializing in FF&E and OS&E and all that wonderful stuff. Thank you for your time. Thank you, our listeners, for listening. As always, you can get more news in the EMEA region on the pages of CoStar News Hotels. I wish you all a very good day. Thank you. Thank you, Manesh.
Hello, I'm Luke Haynes, People Newsletter Editor, CoStar News, and the host of Top Credentials, a monthly podcast exploring the colourful careers of those working at the top of UK commercial real estate. In the episodes, we discover the valuable lessons influencing the daily decision-making of property sector leaders and hear about the aspects of their job that make it a little easier to get out of bed each morning. We'll also ask for their views on the latest news and policies shaping our constantly evolving industry, and even get them to share a famous quote or song title they think defines their career or the profession. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of The Upgrade was recorded on May 19th, 2026 and edited by Sean McCracken. Visit costar.com/hotel news for more coverage and find all of our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or your platform of choice.